Welcome to UK Property Info. Your council has found new ways to take money from you, and here is the thing that makes it even more frustrating. Every single one of these charges is completely legal. While you were focused on whether your council tax was going up by 3% or 5%, local authorities across the country have been quietly rolling out an entirely separate system of fees, charges, premiums, and levies that now add hundreds or even thousands of pounds to the annual cost of owning a home. If you care about keeping more of your own money, subscribe to this channel right now, because I am going to expose every trick they are using and show you exactly how to protect yourself from the worst of it. Let me start with what has actually changed. For decades, council funding worked in a relatively straightforward way. Central government provided grants, business rates were collected and redistributed, and council tax topped up the difference. Local authorities had limited flexibility to raise additional revenue. If they wanted more money, they essentially had to lobby central government for bigger grants, or push for higher council tax bands, both of which were politically visible and face resistance. But over the past decade, central government grants have been slashed dramatically. Some councils have lost 60 to 80% of their central government funding. They have been told to become self-sufficient, to find their own revenue sources, to innovate their way out of financial difficulty. And innovate they have. What has emerged is a shadow taxation system that operates entirely outside the council tax framework, subject to far less scrutiny, and designed to extract maximum revenue from anyone who owns property. The most widespread of these new charges is garden waste collection. 20 years ago, if you put your grass cuttings and hedge trimmings in a brown bin, the council collected it as part of the service your council tax paid for. Today, more than half of all councils in England charge separately for garden waste collection. The typical fee is between £40 and £70 per year, but some councils now charge over £100 annually. If you refuse to pay, your garden waste simply does not get collected. You either have to compost everything yourself, take it to the tip yourself, or pay a private company to collect it. The councils argue this is discretionary, that not everyone has a garden. So why should flat dwellers subsidise garden waste collection? But the reality is that these charges were introduced to raise revenue, not to create fairness. Councils that introduced garden waste charges did not reduce council tax for everyone else. They simply added a new income stream on top of what they were already collecting. Bulky waste collection has gone the same way. Need the council to collect an old sofa, a broken fridge, or a mattress you are replacing. That used to be included in your council tax. Now almost every council charges separately, typically between £20 and £50 per collection, and some charge per item rather than per collection. A household clearing out after a bereavement or doing a major renovation can easily face charges of £100 or more just to have the council take away items that residents have no other practical way to dispose of. Some councils have introduced booking systems that require waits of several weeks, pushing residents toward paying premium rates for faster collection or using private services instead. The council still operates the service, still uses the same trucks and staff, but has converted it from a tax-funded public service into a commercial revenue generator. Parking has become another major extraction point. Resident parking permits that were once free or cost a nominal £10 or £20 now routinely cost £100 or more per year in many areas. Visitor permits that allowed friends and family to park near your home have been monetised, with some councils charging £5 or more per day for visitor parking. Second car permits often cost double or triple the first car rate. Some councils have introduced emissions-based charging, where diesel vehicles or older petrol cars cost significantly more to park than newer or electric vehicles. The environmental argument sounds reasonable until you realise that the charges apply to residents who have no public transport alternatives and cannot afford to replace their vehicles. The emissions surcharge becomes simply another revenue stream extracted from those least able to pay. Planning application fees have increased dramatically and continue to rise. A householder application that cost a few £100s a decade ago now costs several £100s more. Some categories of application have seen fee increases of 50% or more in recent years. But beyond the official fees, councils have found ways to monetise the planning process further. Pre-application advice that was once provided free as a public service now typically costs hundreds of pounds. Some councils charge for basic planning information that used to be freely available. discharge of conditions applications, which are often required before you can actually start building work that has already been approved, each carry their own fees. A homeowner doing a moderately complex extension can easily pay over £1,000 in planning-related fees before a single brick is laid. Building control is another area where charges have exploded. If you use council building control rather than a private-approved inspector, you will pay fees that have risen far faster than inflation. Some councils have responded to budget pressures by raising building control fees to levels that make them uncompetitive with private sector alternatives. Others have gone the opposite direction, cutting building control staff so dramatically that inspections are delayed by weeks, forcing homeowners to either accept long delays or pay extra for priority service. The two-tier system that is emerging effectively charges premium rates for the service that was once standard. Empty home premiums represent one of the most aggressive new charges councils have introduced. If you own a property that has been empty for 1 year, councils can now charge a 100% premium on top of normal council tax. After 5 years empty, this rises to 200%. After 10 years, 300%. Some councils are now authorised to charge up to 400% for the longest term empty properties. The policy intention is to encourage empty homes back into use, and that is a reasonable objective. But the reality is that many empty homes are empty for reasons beyond the owner's control. Properties stuck in probate while estates are settled. Homes that need extensive renovation that the owner cannot afford. Properties in areas with no buyer demand whatsoever. The premiums do not help bring these homes back into use. They simply punish owners who are already in difficult situations while generating revenue for the council. Second home premiums are the latest addition to this arsenal. Councils in many areas can now charge up to 100% premium on council tax for second homes. This means a second home that would normally attract council tax of £2,000 now costs £4,000 per year. Further increases to 200% are being discussed and will likely be implemented in coming years. Again, the policy rationale around housing availability sounds reasonable, but the practical impact falls on families who might have inherited a small holiday cottage, or those who need to maintain a property near work while their family lives elsewhere. The charges do not distinguish between wealthy investors with property portfolios and ordinary families in complicated circumstances. Care costs represent perhaps the most significant and least understood of the new charges affecting homeowners. If you or a family member need residential care or significant home care support, the council will assess your finances to determine how much you should contribute. This assessment now includes property wealth in almost all circumstances. A homeowner with a house worth £300,000 but minimal savings can be required to pay the full cost of their care, potentially running to £50,000 or more per year, until their total assets fall below the threshold. The council can place a charge on the property, effectively securing their claim against the home to be recovered when the property is eventually sold. This is not technically a new charge, but the thresholds and rules have been tightened significantly, and far more families now find themselves facing property-secured care costs than in previous generations. Licensing schemes have proliferated across many councils. Landlords now face mandatory licensing fees in many areas, selective licensing in others, and additional licensing for houses in multiple occupation. These schemes typically cost several £100s per property every 5 years and come with extensive compliance requirements. The fees fund council enforcement activity rather than providing any direct benefit to landlords or tenants. Some councils have introduced licensing schemes covering such broad areas that thousands of landlords have been brought into the charging regime. The costs are ultimately passed on to tenants through higher rents, but the immediate impact falls on property owners who face penalties of up to £30,000 if they fail to obtain required licenses. Street naming and numbering might seem like a minor issue, but councils now charge for services that were once administrative functions included in general taxation. Want to name your new house? That will be a fee. Need official confirmation of your address for legal purposes? Another fee. Requesting the council to name a new street in a development? A significant fee, often passed on to property buyers through the purchase price. These individual charges might only be £20 or £50 each, but they represent the principle of converting every possible interaction with the council into a revenue opportunity. Freedom of information requests related to property are increasingly being refused on cost grounds, with councils offering to provide the information for a fee instead. Land charge searches, essential for property transactions, have seen fee increases well above inflation. Some councils have introduced premium services for faster turnaround, effectively creating a two-tier system where those who can pay more get faster service. Highway searches and drainage inquiries now routinely carry charges that add to conveyancing costs. Each of these fees individually might be modest, but collectively they add hundreds of pounds to the cost of buying or selling a property. Leisure services that were once subsidised by council tax now operate on increasingly commercial terms. Swimming pools charge admission fees that have risen dramatically. Leisure centre memberships cost more than private gym alternatives in some areas. Sports pitch hire has increased. Library services, while still technically free to access, now charge for many additional services, including printing, computer use, and room hire. Parks and open spaces remain free, but parking charges at car parks have been introduced or increased. The message is clear. Councils are converting every possible service into a direct revenue stream. How did all of this happen without more public awareness or resistance? The answer lies in how these charges were introduced. Each individual charge was presented as reasonable in isolation. Garden waste is a discretionary service. Parking permits help manage demand. Planning fees should reflect the cost of processing applications. Bulky waste collection costs money to operate. Second home premiums help address the housing crisis. Each argument has some merit considered on its own, but nobody presented the cumulative picture. Nobody showed homeowners that while they were debating a 3% council tax rise, their total payments to local government were increasing by 20 or 30% through all these additional charges. The salami slicing strategy worked perfectly because each slice was thin enough to avoid triggering significant opposition. What can homeowners do to protect themselves? First, understand exactly what you are paying. Go through your direct debits and standing orders. Add up every payment that goes to your local authority or relates to services they used to provide. You might be shocked at the total. Second, check whether you are entitled to any exemptions or reductions. Single-person discounts on council tax are well known, but there are exemptions for empty properties undergoing renovation, discounts for annexes, and reductions for properties with disabled adaptations. Many homeowners do not claim exemptions they are entitled to because they do not know they exist. Third, consider whether you actually need the services you are paying for. If you can compost garden waste effectively, you might not need the collection service. If you rarely have visitors who drive, you might not need visitor parking permits. Some charges are avoidable if you adjust your behaviour. For landlords, understanding your licensing obligations is essential. Operating without required licenses can result in fines of up to £30,000 and rent repayment orders covering up to 12 months of rent. The compliance costs are significant, but the penalties for non-compliance are far worse. Check what licensing schemes operate in every area where you own property and ensure you are fully compliant. For those with empty properties, understand that premiums are calculated based on how long the property has been empty, and the clock does not reset easily. If you are renovating a property, check what exemptions might apply and ensure you have documentation to support any claims. Some councils are aggressive in applying premiums, and you may need to appeal if you believe charges have been incorrectly applied. Looking forward, these charges are only going to increase. Councils face ongoing budget pressures with no relief in sight. Central government has made clear that local authorities need to fund themselves. New charging opportunities are constantly being explored. Road pricing schemes, workplace parking levies, tourism taxes, and infrastructure charges on new developments are all being discussed or piloted in various areas. The principle that everything the council does should be funded by those who directly use the service is becoming embedded, replacing the older idea that local taxation should fund services for the community as a whole. Homeowners need to understand that the true cost of owning property now extends far beyond the mortgage payment and the council tax bill. A comprehensive assessment of all property-related charges is essential for anyone budgeting for home ownership. The fundamental issue is that councils have been given responsibility without resources. Central government cut their funding while simultaneously mandating that they maintain services and meet statutory obligations. The only way to square this circle was to find new revenue sources, and property owners were the obvious target, because they are a captive audience. You cannot move your house to avoid garden waste charges. You cannot shop around for a different council's parking permits. You cannot negotiate planning fees. Property owners are stuck with whatever their council decides to charge, and councils know this perfectly well. This is why transparency matters. This is why understanding the full picture of what councils are taking from property owners matters. And this is why sharing this information as widely as possible matters. The councils found new ways to charge you, and every single one of those charges is legal. They were introduced through proper processes, approved by councillors, and implemented according to regulations. That does not make them fair. That does not make them reasonable. That does not mean you should accept them without question. Challenge incorrect charges. Claim exemptions you are entitled to. Avoid unnecessary services. And make your voice heard through the democratic process, because councillors ultimately respond to voter pressure. And if enough property owners express concern about the cumulative burden of these charges, change becomes possible. The first step is awareness. Now you know what they are doing. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. Thanks for watching UK Property Info. Stay informed, protect your wealth, and I will see you in the next one.